Rajit, Navneet, hi, it's good to have you with us. How have you been?
Hi Ashu, thanks for having us.
All
All good.
good.
Guys, I've been looking forward to this session. This is an important session, largely because the world is talking about EVs, right? And I think especially the last 2.5 years, of COVID, the seriousness around EVs, for example, and I think in general, I think as human beings, our sensitivity towards responsible living, sustainable living, I think has just taken a very different kind of it's become very very deep, right? It's become just so much more pertinent, and I think everybody's in the ecosystem talking about it, right? I think the shift has been very very significant. Uh, but while the shift has been significant, the challenges that have been there in the EV ecosystem, right, have been many many, right? From the infrastructure which is available to adoption to charging, so on and so forth, right? Availability again was a huge problem because of this logistical, dichotomy that kind of came in the process. It's not necessarily been very, very continuous, right? It's not been a very smooth ride, but the transition has been absolutely phenomenal, right? So what we are seeing, while it's in bits and pieces, right, the shift is phenomenal. I mean, who could have thought that EV is something which is going to become so much more pertinent, right? Organizations today, especially e-commerce businesses, are adopting to EVs in a phenomenal format, right? In fact, they're transitioning their IG-based logistical fleets to EVs, and that's a very, very strong shift. We're seeing two-wheelers, for example, becoming very pertinent. So I think cumulatively, I think there's a lot of activities happening, not necessarily very continuous, but very exciting at the same time. At Dispatch, you guys are doing amazing work, right? When I look at it, I mean, I look at it you as not just an automobile company in the EV space, but a design company which is trying to sort of crack a more functional problem. Because many hardwares that we look at are not necessarily equipped with the kind of permutation combinations that are required, right, for the challenges that are there in the B2B space or in the B2C space. And I think this makes this conversation very, very special and exciting at many levels, right? But before we do that, Rajit, Navneet, I'm gonna quickly, I need you to introduce yourself and we move into the conversation from there on. Navneet, Rajit, if you could introduce yourself, that'd be nice.
Sure. So I'm Rajit Arya, co-founder and CEO at Dispatch. Uh, Started my journey with EVs actually all the way back in 2010.
Sure.
Did a lot of experimental work, did a bunch of pilots, tried building a lot of products, built supply chains, distribution, manufacturing, and so on. Navneet and I got together to start Dispatch in 2020.
Wow.
Yep.
Very interesting.
I'm Navneet. I'm the chief product for Dispatch Vehicles. I'm primarily from the transportation design background. Studied in Italy, graduated from there, and went on to work for Honda and a few other European car manufacturers. Came back over here, got in touch with Rajit, and we got started with building something from grounds up. It's not very often that you get to build something from a clean sheet of paper. This opportunity was too good.
You don't. I completely agree, right? In fact, and that's possibly my first question. And a very, very critical question, right? I think the choice of fight that you've chosen, right? And I think you possibly picked up the most difficult end, right? Particularly when you look at a lot of players in the startup ecosystem, and when you look at the startup ecosystem and the venture capital ecosystem, which is just such a critical, they're very, very deeply integrated, right? Because capital is very important. When you look at players that are in the hardware segment that are trying to sort of crack the hardware segment, we've usually seen the bigger boys, get that, up sort of an edge, right? Because they have certain infrastructure, certain ecosystem that is already going to them, which is very, very critical for a market like India, right? And why do I say that is because India exists at many levels. Would love to understand, right? Of course, Navneet, I understand, right, that he comes from a design background and so and so forth, right? But I would love to understand the choice of business or starting from manufacturing, and that's a very different ball game, right? You've got to solve for many many more problems. What made you do that?
Sure, you're absolutely right. When we started working in the space, actually many years back, not just when we started Dispatch, this was always a concern. India, especially just like you mentioned, does not have the venture capital available in abundance for hardware, let alone hardware on wheels. So there was always a concern that we would have a hard time. And hardware, as the name goes, is harder any which because it requires hardware, but it also requires software. So it's a double challenge. But I think it's once you know what you want to do, why you're building something, why you're interested in putting together a product, you tend to forget about these challenges and you try to focus on what you're going to be doing. Once we decided that we wanted to build a product like this, we sort of said to ourselves that we'll face these challenges step by step, but this is what we want to do, so it is what it is.
Very interesting, Rajit. Navneet, I would want to bring you into the conversation, right? I mean, you're somebody who's leading the entire product side of it, right? When I look at, when we were doing our research, when I looked at, for example, the information which is available when you look at your website, right? It was absolutely spectacular, right? I have not come across something which is so detailed, right? These many nuances, smaller nuances that you, for example, factor in, right? Are amazing, right? It's a massively functional sensibility which is at display, right? Tell us a little more about the product, right? That you've had, and you've been at it for some time now. Take us through the process.
Sure. First of all, thanks, Ashu. Very kind words. Of course, I mean, when we got started with this entire journey, the first thing that we did before anything else was go out and speak to people. Speak to people in this industry, the delivery riders, the fleets. And it was only during that process that we really realized that we can't just take a blind approach to design. We can't just draw something on paper and call it a concept and then bring it to market and then we're done with it and cross our fingers and expect the engineering team to do the reliability work so that this works for that particular product segment. We spoke to these guys, we understood those nuances, and those nuances were what led to our design brief, which is very unique in the sense that we have 6 core aspects of it that we've covered across toughness, reliability, connectivity, ergonomics, profitability, and serviceability. So we took all of these from day one and we built out our entire development process from scratch. For this segment of B2B two-wheelers, right? So B2B two-wheelers is not a segment that's mainstream yet, right? It's something that we had to rethink completely. And that's what brought about this. We actually have some proprietary algorithms that help us do this, that we've developed through the design softwares itself. And this is what led to such a unique looking product, highly focused on functionality and really focused on reliability and toughness.
Very interesting. I would want my team to sort of plug in, the video, right, that you guys have. I think for people who are going to be watching this, for them to understand, what we're kind of talking about, right? I think you're very softly and very mildly putting it across, right? I think the product speaks volumes for the kind of intelligence that is found in, right? Rajit, I'd love to understand where are you in your current journey? You've been at it for some time now, right? The product has gotten refined over a period of time, which is a justified case, right? Especially when you're solving for a very large market like India. Tell us where you are right now.
Right. So, Ashu, when we started off with the design and development of this product, because of this process, the design part happened really quickly, right? It was sort of timelines that one can't imagine. But in the development process, we also started to pay a lot of attention to reliability because we are not solving for 20-30 kilometers per day kind of a use case. We're solving for anywhere between 100 and 200 kilometers per day. So the kind of reliability that we're talking about is way beyond that of personal mobility vehicles. So what we decided was to sort of push back our launch and production and rather focus more on testing and validation. So we have this very elaborate testing and validation program, which is sort of being done in multiple phases. So the product will actually go through a lot of kilometers on roads, which is probably 10x of what usually is done. It will go through a lot of lab testing, track testing, but it will also go through a lot of kilometers on road. And that essentially is being done primarily to ensure that once the product goes into the customer's hands, the end user, the gig economy worker, the fleet user, it's not a situation where then we have teething issues with the product and then we can get the product back, recall it, fix it. You can't do that when someone's using that product for business.
Absolutely.
Right? Because their livelihood depends on it. Their income, everything depends on it. So if there's no product, if there's downtime, it's a loss of revenue and hence it's not a good idea. So we are paying a lot more focus to reliability testing. Now, having said that, we're looking to start production next year, by mid next year, and that's where we are.
Super. Rajit, now, and possibly Navneet can chip in, right? Now, when we talk about the EVs ecosystem, right, especially in the B2B space, largely because that is a very, very deep core focus, that you have. Right? Now, what are some of the challenges? I mean, of course, we know challenges of, for example, infrastructure, we know challenges of battery, universality of battery is again a big problem, right? Lithium-ion, again, there are challenges on that front. Chipsets, semiconductors, again, is a big problem, right? So there's this huge pile up. And what are some of those challenges that you try to address, which you think are possibly, given that you're closer to the situation, you can possibly help us understand your priorities better in that sense, right? From a market standpoint as well. What are some of the core challenges, for example, that you saw, right? I mean, when I look at the product, right, I see a 2 battery set, for example, right? What's, for example, what are some of the key challenges that you try to address in the product?
There are a bunch of them, right? So manufacturing and supply chain, as you know, currently are the biggest ones.
Right.
And hence, right from day one, because we've been doing this for a long time, even before dispatch, we sort of knew of these challenges. We sort of knew of where we would have issues, where scaling up could be an issue, where timelines could become an issue. So we mitigated these challenges right from day one. We've taken a very different approach to supply chain, a very different approach to manufacturing, which we'll be talking about in the coming months. We've got some exciting partnerships in this, in the area that were going to be announced. So we're not going the traditional way for manufacturing. We're not going the traditional way for a lot of different things that we're doing, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's product development. We're doing a lot of things differently. So it's not just a different product segment, but a lot of different ecosystem solutions.
Super. Navneet, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah. So in addition to what Rajit said, there's one core aspect behind the B2B segment that we sort of realized by talking to all these guys, right? It was that at the end of the day, the whole element of pride of ownership, right, of a product, even if it's in a shared ecosystem, is still important. Like if you have to be spotted riding a dispatch vehicle, currently what we were hearing from some delivery riders were that the current EVs that they're asked to ride, some of them genuinely felt a little bit embarrassed about riding around on. And this was something that came as a little bit of a surprise for us. We didn't think of B2B as being conscious of this particular aspect. But at the end of the day, we are talking about human beings. And when you put yourself in those shoes and bring that empathetic approach towards the product development, that's something that we place a lot of importance towards from the design side of things. So if you notice with the vehicle, the proportions, although everything is super minimal, we've managed to create a proportion that's still quite dynamic, quite sporty, and something that gives a sense of a little bit of dynamism. And this is something that was very critical for us to give that feeling of a professional grade tool that somebody is, having a little bit of pride in owning.
That's a very interesting point. That's a very, very interesting point that you highlighted, right? I think a lot of companies don't necessarily look at that. I mean, and I'm kind of in my mind, I'm visualizing it when you're actually putting it out, right? I think that pride of ownership is just so much more critical, right? I think which is just a very soft element in itself, right? Possibly never clearly defined, often overlooked. But I think that just is so distinct, right? Very interesting. Right, Rajit, while there are many things that I would have loved to ask you on the manufacturing side of it and distribution side of it, right? You've actually put curtains on that for now, and we're going to wait for announcements to come in, right? But I'm going to move on to talk a little about competition, right? And I think competition, so there's competition which is happening in the space, not just from say the larger the big boys in the game, right? The established automobile companies moving into the space, right? So you have the Gujarats of the world and the heroes of the world, right? We have the newer ones as well. Now, while of course newer ones are still sort of grappling and getting pieces together, and that's largely because there is little on-ground experience and exposure that they have, right? The bigger boys have picked up the game very, very quickly. You talk about B2B, right? The hero is really sort of, kind of leading the game by quite a distance. What's when you look at this, right? Now, Hero is a brand with, say, these newer models of financing, for example, that are coming in, right? Hero is a brand that commands a certain reliability, right? The perception is already there. I'm sure there's a percentage of clients, customers who are discontent, right, with quality of service, and variety of the issues. But the brand commands a premium, right? Automobile, that becomes very, very important, right? People look at a variety of those things. How do you see yourself fighting, such perceptive, issues, aspects, right, that have been created? And we continue to be a market which is, still picking up on education, right? I mean, with education, you have, a dialogue you can create, right? And with logic, you can create differentiation of the product, right? Here, because we're still not there completely, right? Brand and brand recall and the longevity of it in the market becomes a very critical, right? And with that comes the possibility of infrastructure, repairs and so on and so forth, right? Which the luxury we might not have, at least with the current version that I have. What's your sense of it? How are you looking at all of that?
So, Ashu, I personally strongly believe that in the EV space, because it's a new technology, the early initiatives were taken by new companies, not by legacy companies.
Sure.
Products will trump brands. It's going to be that way.
Sure.
Good products will be seen for what they are, no matter what label they carry. Having said that, what I'm trying to say as a larger point is that every other product that you see in the B2B space, without naming any product, it's very clear that no one has gone into making the product grounds up for B2B or for these applications and addressing the core issues of these applications, which is that fleet mobility, commercial mobility, shared mobility is very different, fundamentally very different from personal mobility. So just by making the product, making it look utility, making it sound utility by giving it a name or dressing it up aesthetically to make it look utility doesn't make it utility.
I agree.
There are a lot of fundamental core areas of design and engineering that need to be very different.
Sure.
And when that is sort of put out and when people see that differentiation, they will place value in the product.
Interesting. I agree with your point, right? Now, I mean, honestly, I am somebody who's in for a, that shift that we possibly kind of, talking about, right? And you evangelize it, right? And I also agree with the fact that, the startups have been the ones who really, started going out and, kind of conceptualize the new product, right? And started to engage the audience, also, right? But the success that you see on the ground is limited, right? So when you're not talking about just urban India, right? You're not just talking about 3 or 4 markets, right? Which is say a Bangalore or a Mumbai or a Delhi, right? Or NCR. You're talking about tier 2 and tier 3, right? I mean, that's where the large consumption is going to happen, right? That market still continues to be very, very brand conscious, right? And there is a certain sense of reliability, like I say, right? So what does it take for a newer brand to engage that audience, right? And India is a jugaad market, right? I mean, and you know it and I know it, right? While of course we can continue to talk of a great product. I mean, we've seen products being used the way they have been, right? So you cannot take away that creativity from Indians away, right? Is there a particular strategy that you have in mind to sort of tackle that? What's going to be the approach? If not specifics, what is the larger approach that you have in mind to create that impression, which is I think that becomes the first engagement of sorts, right?
Right. So if you look at why that has happened, why the early companies are still yet to make a mark in terms of volumes, in terms of market share, etc., etc. It's primarily because new companies have focused their efforts, their resources, money, time, everything on product, which takes longer. The gestation period is longer, right? But they're creating a foundation for a long time, for a long time to come. When you look at some of the other players that have built sort of footing in the tier 2, tier 3 rural, semi-urban kind of markets, it's because their focus was more on distribution, their focus was more on building the brand through marketing and communication, not so much on the product, right? Yeah. So that will not have a lasting effect. But when you invest in good products, when you build that foundation strong, that will last longer.
Interesting.
So you will see shift happen probably in the next 2-3 years.
Very interesting. While of course I would love you to talk about the infrastructure, for example, right? For example, batteries is the most talked about thing, right? I mean, there is a lot of money which is going into batteries and and various other combinations that are happening around batteries, right? What's been your approach, to bringing in efficiency on that front? Love to hear that.
So, Ashu, it's very clear that for our applications, the the target audience, which is fleets and gig economy workers, everything from last mile delivery to rideshare services, bike taxis, institutional fleets is what we're targeting. And for these applications, there's one single fundamental major difference, which is the number of kilometers they ride every day.
Right.
And how quickly they need energy to be put back into the vehicle, how little downtime they can afford. And this is what fundamentally makes B2B products or commercial products different from personal mobility products.
Sure.
So based on that, it's very clear to us, and it's very clear from when we speak to our potential customers, when we interview gig economy workers, delivery riders, and so on, that they cannot afford 3, 4, 5 hours to charge.
Correct.
They can also not afford 1 hour if that is called fast charging.
Right.
So the only solution that works is either swap or maybe like a 10-15 minute charge. Anything beyond that doesn't work in every use case. Yes, there are certain use cases where it's fine, but not for every use case. Because we have to understand the number of hours and the number of kilometers that these guys consume of the vehicle. They cannot afford to have periods of 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours waiting around and losing out on that revenue.
That's why it becomes important.
Yeah. And a lot of fleets actually use the same vehicle in multiple shifts with multiple riders. Right. So they want to, as you said, they want asset sweat to be as high as possible so that they get maximum return per vehicle.
Interesting. Rajit, would love to understand what are the primary markets that you what are the primary markets that you've decided to face on? Which are the markets as you go into production, as you sort of start rolling it out, right? Which are the key markets that you're targeting to yourself?
For us also, we will be beginning with the larger cities, all the metros, heavy urban areas, because that's where last mile delivery is predominant. That's where rideshare services are predominant. So we'll be focusing on that to begin with, and then start trickling down into tier 2, tier 3 and semi-urban markets. But urban markets will be our focus area.
Interesting. And any particular industry that you're targeting first? Is there a priority in that sense?
So we're going after quick commerce, we're going after food delivery, we're going after e-com delivery. We're going after everything that moves on two-wheelers that is a shared application or a commercial application. We're going after rideshare.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. Rajit, what's your anticipation, right, from an industrial standpoint, right? I mean, when you're doing hardware, and especially in EV, right, you're not just doing the vehicle, right? I mean, you're doing pretty much all of it, right? In a way, you kind of alluded to it, right? When you talk about battery swap, right? What are some of the things that you have in your sleeve, right, which you need to sort of tackle and solve as you go live?
Right. So battery swap, as you also are trying to say, is not the easiest challenge, right?
Right.
It's a very complex challenge. Batteries for battery swap are also they're more complex than fixed batteries. They need to have a lot more protection built into them for safety, durability, the network itself, the capital that goes into setting up the network, also the batteries in what they call inventory batteries or network batteries or floating batteries. That's the batteries outside the vehicle that are within the network. The capital requirement is very high. So there are unique challenges. While we know that we cannot solve for those challenges from day one ourselves alone, there may be a time 2-3 years down the road where we'll be in a position where we can do it on our own. But we can't wait for that long, right? Our customers will need swap from day one, and hence we're getting into some very interesting partnerships around battery swap with some very credible, very large organizations that have made a mark in the battery swap name in the market.
Interesting. And we'll wait for some of those announcements to come through. Rajit, I'm going to move into talking about the pricing, right? What are the price points that plans that you're playing with? I mean, given that you're doing B2B, right? And there are a bunch of options that are already available, right? Do you have flexibility on that front? Or there are very clear indicative price ranges that you essentially have to abide by, right? What's happening on that front?
The price is very critical to our target audience, right? It's not a market where you can come up with a really good product and say, okay, you have to pay a premium because it's a really good product. Right? So it's a very, very price sensitive market. And though EVs, especially in the B2B space, will deliver better TCO over time, our customers care about upfront cost because they have to arrange for capital to buy these vehicles.
Right.
So we are focused on pricing the vehicles either at par or at a very, very small premium, which could be 2 to 5%. In cases where we're offering more than the competition in terms of functionality and features.
Right.
So we're not trying to position ourselves at a premium. We're not trying to position ourselves at the higher end of the market by saying, buy our product because it's better, you have to pay more. We're saying that we managed to make a product that's better, but we found ways to cut costs so that we can price it at par with the market.
Interesting. And any direction on the price bands, or a little too early for you to talk about?
So I can give you some hints there. We've got three variants that are going to be launched in a phased manner starting next year. All the three variants will be priced between 60,000 rupees and 90,000 rupees.
Interesting. Rajit, now financing is something which is just so much more critical, right? When you're looking at some of the larger players, they have their own financing arms, for example, right? And they've kind of brought that in and they're kind of leveraging that. There are new models that, for example, they've strategically invested in, right? Of course, without naming anybody, right? And that is essentially what is also powering the distribution, at least in the B2B sort of space, right? Do you have some such strategic alignments? While you've of course mentioned on the distribution side of it, right? If you could give us a certain sense, that will be very interesting.
Yeah. So finance is very critical, but also very unique in our space. The issue that our industry will face, or our segment will face, is that a large number, probably a majority of our potential customers. See, we need to understand that the largest chunk of the fleet is actually not owned by companies.
Sure.
It's owned by the end user, the delivery rider, the bike taxi operator, guys in the gig economy. They, more often than not, do not have bankable or papers that they can get finance on.
Sure.
And that's becoming the biggest challenge. Their papers, their credit history, there's none of that. Sometimes they don't have bank accounts.
Right.
So that's why there's a lot of unique challenges that there are some very interesting companies solving for that, and we're partnering with some of them. So there's innovation in terms of how loans can be approved, how loans can be disbursed, and what more can be done other than just a standard two-wheeler loan. So there's leasing options, there's rental options,
right.
There's rent-to-own options. So a lot of innovation in the finance industry, and we're partnering with some very exciting companies.
Very interesting. Rajit, many more questions, right? But I think we're going to resolve some of those questions, till you get to the market, right? I think we're going to have many more points, right? In terms of offtake, in terms of sales velocity, consumer side challenges, right? And like I said, right, and I think all of us agree that India is a complex market, right? Your observation and your experiences are very different as you get out. I'm going to reserve some of these questions, till then, right, as we get out the market. What are the next 2.5 years like, right? Of course, you've given us a date and time, right, in terms of when, for example, you go live, right? But what are the milestones that you set for yourself? Are there any indicated numbers that you kept for yourself that you want to achieve within this period? I would love to ask you a 5-year question, but I think it's just too much in future, right? Of what you experienced in the last 2.5 years, right? So I'm not going to go beyond that. But what are the next 2.5 years like? What are the milestones that you set for yourself?
When we started off, Ashu, we thought we'll sell probably 1,000 scooters a month in the first year of production, right? We said we'll do 12,000 scooters. Sure. There was no data to really support it because there's no bifurcated data for commercial two-wheelers versus personal mobility two-wheelers.
Sure.
When we went out and started talking to companies, we felt a little more confident. We started getting a lot of interest in our product, and we said, okay, that number looks like it's going to be doubling. So we thought we're going to be making 25,000 units. Now, after we unveil the product, once we've started interacting with companies, we're already seeing demand for anywhere between 75,000 to a lakh vehicles in the first year itself. Now, the question is whether we can make so many in the first year, given the supply chain challenges, given that manufacturing ramp up is not, that easy. But as I said, we've made some strategic sort of, plans in terms of how we're going to approach manufacturing, how we're going to do it differently so that we can ramp up and scale up faster. We've also done this through, design optimization, where we made our products simpler to manufacture and easier to ramp up and scale up. So we're looking at anywhere between 50,000 and 75,000 units in the first year of production.
That is amazing, Rajit. Like I said, right, many more questions, but I think all those things have to come to an end, and so does this session, right? I think a lot of those questions I will, reserve for our next conversation as you hit the ground running. Right? I think those experiences are going to be very, very important. I think a lot of people are going to understand a lot of those, finer challenges, right? And India is a complex market, and I think we're going to wait for some of that, right? But Rajit, Navneet, it was absolutely amazing to have two of you. The product is lovely. It's so much more functional, right? And I think, at least visually when I look at it, right, what's impressive is to see an incredible product of this quality come out of India, right? I think this is extremely intelligently done. It definitely stands out. We wish you all the very best in this journey. And I'm sure it's not going to be easy. From the conversation, what seems is that a lot of parts are figured out, and possibly a lot is going to get figured in the process, right? But the good part is that you're committed to the game. You're understanding and looking at the industry and how it sort of unfolds very, very closely and very sharp, right? And possibly all of that is going to get factored in across versions of products that you launch in the future. Guys, thank you so much for doing this. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and like I said, right, look forward to having you with us much sooner, where we talk of as you experience in the ground. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Ashu. Thanks for having us.